The marble floors of courtroom 7 had witnessed countless confessions, but none would echo through history quite like the words that were about to be spoken. If this story moves you, hit that like button. Justice deserves to be shared. The morning sun cut through the tall windows in sharp, accusatory angles, illuminating particles of dust that hung suspended in the thick silence. Judge Elias Monroe sat elevated behind the bench, his weathered hands folded precisely atop a worn leather folder. At 63, his face carried the topography of 1,000 verdicts, deep lines etched by difficult decisions, eyes that had seen humanity at its worst and occasionally at its redemptive best. He did not speak yet. He rarely did, until speaking became the only option left. Below him, the courtroom held its collective breath. Wooden pews creaked under the weight of spectators who had arrived before dawn, drawn by whispers of what this case represented. The air smelled of old wood polish and nervous perspiration, that particular scent that only courtrooms seem to manufacture, the smell of consequences approaching. At the defense table sat Cameron Whitmore, 26 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was styled with the careless perfection that only expensive salons achieve. He leaned back in his chair with the posture of someone attending a mildly inconvenient social event rather than his own criminal trial. His attorney, Margaret Chen, sat beside him with the rigid spine of someone trying to hold together a case built on sand. Cameron was charged with vehicular assault, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. 3 months prior, his Mercedes SUV had jumped a curb on Riverside Drive, striking a bicycle and sending its rider, a 52-year-old elementary school teacher named Robert Delgado, into a coma that lasted 17 days. Cameron had not stopped. He had not called for help. He had driven home, parked in his gated community, and gone to sleep. What made this case particularly venomous was who Cameron's father was. Senator Richard Whitmore, a man whose campaign ads featured him pointing at cameras while promising to be tough on crime and a voice for law and order. The irony was not lost on anyone in that courtroom, least of all Judge Monroe, whose expression remained as readable as granite. The prosecution had presented their case with surgical precision over 3 days. Surveillance footage showing Cameron's vehicle, testimony from witnesses who heard the impact, forensic evidence linking paint chips from Robert's mangled bicycle to Cameron's SUV, medical reports detailing the titanium plates now permanently installed in Robert's skull, and perhaps most damning text messages retrieved from Cameron's phone, sent just minutes after the accident. Clip some idiot on a bike LOL. Dad will handle it. Robert Delgado sat in the front row, his wife Elena beside him, their hands intertwined. His recovery had been miraculous according to doctors, though his left eye would never focus quite right again, and headaches ambushed him without warning. He had taught 5th grade for 28 years. His students had made him cards during his hospitalization, cards that covered an entire hospital wall with crayon drawings and misspelled words of love. Now it was the defense's turn, and Margaret Chen rose with the heavy grace of someone walking toward a cliff edge. She called only one witness, Cameron Whitmore himself. The gallery stirred. Judge Monroe's eyes flickered with something that might have been interest, though his face remained impassive. Cameron stood, buttoned his suit jacket with deliberate slowness, and walked to the witness stand as if he were strolling into a country club. He placed his hand on the Bible, and the court clerk began the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" Cameron smiled. Actually smiled. "I do." The clerk's hand trembled slightly as she lowered the Bible. Margaret Chen approached her client with visible caution, like someone approaching a volatile chemical. "Mr. Whitmore, can you tell the court in your own words what happened on the evening of August 14th? Cameron settled into the witness chair, crossing one leg over the other. "I was driving home from dinner with friends. It was dark. I may have had a couple drinks, but nothing crazy. This guy on a bike came out of nowhere, no lights, no reflectors, wearing all dark clothing. I felt a bump, Thought maybe I hit a pothole. I had an important meeting early the next morning, so I continued home. The courtroom's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Someone in the gallery audibly gasped. "And when you learned that you had struck a person?" Chen asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Well, I was concerned, obviously, but my father explained that these situations are complicated. There are legal considerations, insurance implications. He advised me to let the proper channels handle it." Robert Delgado's hand tightened around his wife's until his knuckles went white. Chen continued, though her reluctance was palpable. "Mr. Whitmore, the prosecution has made much of your text messages following the incident. Would you like to explain those?" Cameron shrugged, an actual shrug in a courtroom during his own trial. "I was in shock. People say stupid things when they're in shock. It was just dark humor, a way of processing stress. Anyone who knows me knows I didn't mean anything by it." Judge Monroe leaned forward slightly, the first movement he'd made in 20 minutes. The motion drew every eye in the room. Prosecutor Daniel Reeves stood for cross-examination. He was a veteran of the district attorney's office, a man who had put away gang leaders and corrupt officials, but even he seemed energized by a unique kind of disgust as he approached the witness stand. "Mr. Whitmore, you testified that you thought you hit a pothole. Is that correct?" "Yes." "How fast were you traveling?" "I don't know exactly. The speed limit, probably." "The speed limit on that stretch of Riverside Drive is 35 miles per hour. Your vehicle's computer data, which we entered as evidence, shows you were traveling 52 miles per hour. Does that refresh your memory?" Cameron's jaw tightened. "I might have been going a bit over. 17 miles per hour over the speed limit, and you testified you'd had a couple drinks. How many is a couple?" "2, maybe 3. I wasn't drunk." "Your blood alcohol content, taken 10 hours after the accident at your father's insistence that you submit to testing at a private facility, was still at 0.04. Working backward with metabolic rates, experts estimate you were at approximately 11 at the time of the accident. The legal limit is 0.08. Were you drunk, Mr. Whitmore?" "Legally, maybe, but I was fine to drive. I've driven in worse." He caught himself, but too late. "You've driven in worse condition. Thank you for that admission." Reeves let the words hang in the air like smoke. "Mr. Whitmore, when you felt what you described as a bump, did you not have any curiosity about what you'd hit? It was dark. Your vehicle has 6 exterior cameras and automatic emergency braking. Those systems detected an object and attempted to engage the brakes. You manually overrode them. Why?" Cameron's composure finally cracked at the edges. "I didn't want to stop in a bad neighborhood. Riverside Drive, where the average home costs $2.3 million. That bad neighborhood. It was just instinct." Reeves approached closer, his voice dropping but somehow becoming more audible in the process. "Mr. Whitmore, do you know what Robert Delgado does for a living?" "He's a teacher or something. He teaches 5th grade at Riverside Elementary. He's been teaching for 28 years. He sponsors the after-school program for kids whose parents work late. He coaches soccer. He organized the weekend reading club. Do you know what he was doing on that bicycle on August 14th? Cameron said nothing. He was riding home from the school where he'd stayed late, helping a student whose parents are going through a divorce, a 10-year-old girl who had stopped doing homework. He stayed with her for 2 hours after school ended, working through math problems, just being a steady presence. He does this without extra pay. He does it because he believes children matter. Do you know what you were doing that evening, Mr. Whitmore? Objection, Chen called weakly. Relevance. I'm establishing character, Your Honor. Judge Monroe's voice emerged for the first time in an hour, deep and measured. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Whitmore. Cameron shifted in his seat. I was having dinner with friends. At Apex, the steakhouse, your receipt, which we've obtained, shows 4 bottles of wine for your table of 5, plus cocktails, plus after-dinner drinks. Total bill, $3,200. While Robert Delgado was helping a struggling child for free, you were spending more on dinner than he earns in 3 weeks. And then you ran him down in the street and drove away. I didn't know I hit anyone. Reeves turned to face the gallery, his voice rising. You overrode your car's safety systems. You didn't stop to investigate. You texted your friends, making jokes. You called your father before you called emergency services. You waited 72 hours before submitting to alcohol testing. And even now, sitting here under oath, you show not one molecule of genuine remorse. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, do you believe laws apply to you? The courtroom went silent. Even the air circulation system seemed to pause. Cameron Whitmore stared at the prosecutor, his face flushing red, his hands gripping the witness stand. And then, in a moment that would be replayed on news broadcasts across the nation, he said the words that would define him forever. I don't follow laws. I follow opportunities. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of the gallery rising to its feet in unified shock. Margaret Chen dropped her pen. Robert Delgado buried his face in his hands. Judge Monroe's gavel cracked like thunder, once, twice, 3 times. Order! His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The room fell silent instantly. Everyone will be seated, or I will clear this courtroom. People sank back into their seats. Cameron Whitmore seemed to realize too late what he had just said. His face went from red to pale. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Monroe said, and there was something terrible in his calmness. Did I hear you correctly? You don't follow laws. Cameron's attorney grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but he shook her off. Some self-destructive impulse had taken hold. What I meant is that people like me, we create the systems, we employ people, we drive the economy. Laws are for whom? Monroe leaned forward, his hands now flat on the bench. Complete your thought. Cameron's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. Laws are for whom, Mr. Whitmore? For teachers, for working families, for people who ride bicycles because they care about the environment, for children who need someone to stay late and help them with math. For whom are laws designed, if not for you? I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said. I've sat on this bench for 19 years. I've heard every excuse, every justification, every attempt to minimize and deflect. But I have never, not once, heard someone openly state that they believe themselves above the law. Monroe paused, and the silence that followed was crushing. Step down. Cameron stumbled from the witness stand, his legs visibly unsteady. Margaret Chen guided him back to the defense table, her face ashen. Judge Monroe took a moment, his eyes sweeping across the courtroom, landing finally on Robert Delgado. Mr. Delgado, would you stand, please? Robert rose slowly, leaning slightly on his wife for support. Mr. Delgado, I want you to know that this court sees you, not just as a victim, but as a human being who contributes to society in ways that cannot be measured in dollars. Your suffering has been noted. Your dignity has been observed. Justice may be slow, but it is not blind. Robert nodded, tears streaming down his face. Monroe turned back to Cameron. This court is prepared to render its verdict. Cameron Whitmore, you have been found guilty by overwhelming evidence of vehicular assault, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. But your words today have revealed something far more troubling than any single crime. They have revealed a philosophy of entitlement that threatens the very foundation of civil society. He paused, letting the weight settle. The law is not a suggestion for some and a mandate for others. It is not a guideline that bends around privilege. It is the contract we all agree to follow so that we may live together in peace and equity. When someone of means and connection believes they can opt out of that contract, they don't just break the law, they break the social fabric that holds us all together. Cameron's hands were shaking now. You said you follow opportunities, not laws. Let me give you an opportunity, Mr. Whitmore. An opportunity to learn that actions have consequences. An opportunity to understand that a man's worth is not measured by his father's position or his bank account, but by his character and his choices. An opportunity to discover, through hardship and reflection, the humanity you so clearly lack. The gavel hovered in Monroe's hand. "I hereby sentence you to 12 years in state prison, no possibility of parole for a minimum of 8 years. Additionally, you will pay full restitution to Robert Delgado for medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering in an amount to be determined, but not less than $5 million. You will surrender your driver's license permanently, and upon your release, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service, specifically teaching traffic safety to young people so that you might prevent others from following your disastrous example." The gavel fell with finality. "Furthermore," Monroe continued, "I'm filing a formal recommendation with the State Ethics Board regarding Senator Richard Whitmore's conduct in this matter. Using political influence to obstruct justice on behalf of a family member is unconscionable. That investigation will proceed independently of this case." Cameron Whitmore collapsed into his chair. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but he shrugged it off. Bailiffs approached to take him into custody. As they placed handcuffs on his wrists, Cameron finally looked at Robert Delgado. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered across his face. Fear, perhaps, or the first dim recognition of what he had destroyed. But it was too late for recognition to mean anything. Judge Monroe watched as Cameron was led through the side door, disappearing into the machinery of the justice system he had thought himself above. The courtroom remained silent, processing what they had witnessed. "Mr. and Mrs. Delgado," Monroe said softly, "this court owes you an apology. The system failed you when Mr. Whitmore was not arrested immediately. It failed you when evidence was delayed and influence was peddled. But know this, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Today, it bent." Elena Delgado sobbed openly, and her husband held her, his own tears falling onto her shoulder. Monroe gathered his papers slowly, deliberately. Before rising, he spoke one final time, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "To everyone present, remember what you witnessed today. The law is not theater. It is not entertainment. It is the fragile agreement that prevents chaos. When you leave here, honor it, follow it, defend it, because the moment we decide that some people are above the law is the moment we lose everything that makes us civilized." He stood, and the entire courtroom rose with him in a gesture of respect that transcended protocol. As he exited through the door behind the bench, the morning light had shifted, and the courtroom glowed with a warm, almost reverent illumination. Outside, news cameras waited to broadcast the verdict. Inside, people hugged strangers, wiped away tears, and felt the weight of something profound. The rare experience of witnessing true justice administered with wisdom and moral clarity. Robert Delgado and his wife were the last to leave. At the door, Robert turned back to look at the empty courtroom one final time, at the judge's bench, where Elias Monroe had sat, like the moral center of the universe. He whispered something to his wife, and she nodded. Then they walked out together into the afternoon, into their changed lives, carrying with them the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, the system works exactly as it should. The story of Cameron Whitmore's trial spread rapidly through social media, news outlets, and dinner table conversations across the nation. It became a touchstone, a reminder that privilege has limits, that arrogance courts destruction, and that there are still places where character matters more than connections. Judge Elias Monroe received letters from thousands of people thanking him for his wisdom and courage. He never responded to a single one, because for him, it was never about recognition. It was simply about doing what the oath required, administering justice without fear or favor. And in a fifth-grade classroom at Riverside Elementary, children welcomed back their teacher, Mr. Delgado, with handmade signs and heartfelt cheers, completely unaware that their simple joy represented everything worth protecting in this world. Everything that the law, when properly applied, is designed to defend. Because in the end, justice isn't about punishment. It's about saying clearly, definitively, to everyone watching, you matter. Your safety matters. Your dignity matters, and no one, regardless of their name or their wealth, gets to tell you otherwise. If this story reminded you why justice matters, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel for more powerful courtroom stories. Drop a comment below saying "Justice for all," or let us know where you're watching from, because these stories belong to all of us, and they remind us that truth and accountability still have power in this world. Together, we stand for what's right.